a world that stays exactly where you left it. Now picture a man missing all of that, a man whose own balance betrayed him, whose surroundings could tilt and spin without warning. By every rule of the sport, he should never have competed at the highest level, let alone thrived there. Yet he won again and again, outlasting golfers whose bodies never once turned against them. This is the paradox of a man who could barely stand up straight, but still beat everyone. Thomas Levet was born in Paris in 1968 into a family where sport was simply the family language. His father was a doctor by profession, but on the hockey field and the tennis court, he competed at the highest domestic level the sport had to offer. His mother played volleyball in the top division in France. Even further back, his grandfather had raced bicycles professionally. There was no escaping athletic competition in that household. It was inherited, not chosen. As a boy, Thomas followed his father's path first, picking up a hockey stick before he ever held a golf club. But somewhere around the age of 12, golf pulled him in, and this time it stuck. What nobody could have predicted was that this same body, so naturally gifted for sport, would one day turn into his greatest opponent. Before turning professional, Thomas Levet spent his late teenage years testing himself on the international amateur stage and learning quickly that talent alone would not be enough. He competed in the British Boys Amateur Championship in 1985, losing in the very first round. 2 years later, at the British Youth's Open Amateur, he showed real progress, finishing 14th overall. It was not a dominant rise. It was a slow, uneven climb, exactly the kind that would define the next chapter of his career. In 1988, Levet turned professional. His first year on tour looked like the start of something fast and easy. He won the French Professional Golf Association Championship almost immediately, a debut most rookies could only dream of. For a young Frenchman stepping into professional golf, it seemed like the sport had opened its arms without hesitation. That welcome did not last. What followed was nearly a decade of quiet, grinding anonymity. Levet qualified for the European Tour in 1991 and spent years chasing form that refused to arrive. By 1996, his game had collapsed so badly that he made the cut only 3 times on the European Tour that entire season, a number low enough to send him down to the Challenge Tour, the sport's second tier, reserved for players still trying to prove they belonged. For most golfers, that kind of drop marks the beginning of the end. For Levet, it became the setup for a turning point. In April of 1998, he won the Cannes Open, earning back his European Tour card, and with it, his first European Tour title. It was also the first time a French golfer had won on home soil since 1969. And just as his career finally found its footing, something else was quietly beginning to shift. Something inside his own body that no amount of practice could fix. Just as his career finally began to take shape, doctors delivered a diagnosis that threatened to undo everything he had fought 10 years to build: vertigo. To understand what Thomas Levet was fighting, it helps to understand what vertigo actually is. It is not ordinary dizziness. Vertigo is the sensation that the world itself is spinning or tilting even while standing perfectly still, usually caused by a problem deep in the inner ear, the system responsible for keeping the body balanced. When it misfires, the ground beneath a person's feet can feel like the deck of a ship in rough water. For a professional golfer, that is close to a career threat. Golf is a sport built on stillness. A steady head over the ball, a fixed spine angle, a stance that cannot waver by even a fraction of an inch. There is no room in it for a body that occasionally forgets which way is up. Levet's vertigo became severe enough, by his own account, that it nearly forced him out of the game entirely. There was no cure to reach for, only management, adjustment, and a willingness to compete anyway, fully aware that his own balance might betray him at any moment. And yet he did not just survive with the condition, he climbed. Even while dealing with vertigo, Levet worked his way into the top 50 players in the world, proof that a man who could not always trust his own body could still trust it enough to swing at the highest level in the game. If there was one moment that defined how far Thomas Levet could push through his own limitations, it happened on the 21st of July, 2002, at the Open Championship. Levet had carried a small piece of luck into that week, a shamrock inscribed with words about the luck of the Irish, found before his Victor Chandler British Masters victory the year before. He had kept it in his golf bag ever since, a quiet good luck charm from one victory to the next. On the final day, Levet produced the round of his life, a 66 capped by an eagle from 45 feet on the 17th hole that vaulted him into a share of the lead. When he parred the 18th to secure his spot, golf history had already been made. Levet, Ernie Els, Stuart Appleby, and Steve Elkington were tied at the top, forcing the first four-way playoff in the history of the Open Championship. The playoff stretched across 4 holes, and Levet stood right in the thick of it. Heading to the final hole, he held a one-shot lead over Els. One shot, one hole, one chance to become the first Frenchman to win the Claret Jug since 1907. Then came the bogey. The lead disappeared, and the match spilled into sudden death. There, Els made his move, and Levet's dream ended with another bogey. What happened next is the reason people still talk about that day. Instead of collapsing into disappointment, Levet walked over to Els, the man who had just denied him the biggest win of his life, and lifted him onto his shoulders in celebration. Asked about it afterward, Levet simply said, "He's not that heavy, actually." No bitterness, no theatrics. Just a golfer who understood, in that moment, that losing gracefully was its own kind of victory. It remains the closest any Frenchman has come to winning golf's oldest major championship in nearly a century. Not a trophy, not a plaque, but a single image. A man lifting his conqueror off the ground with a smile on his face. For Levet, whose own body so often fought against him, standing tall enough to carry another man's weight was, in its own strange way, the most fitting ending imaginable. 2 years after Muirfield, Thomas Levet delivered the finest week of his career on home soil in Scotland. At the Scottish Open in July of 2004, he closed with a stunning final round of 63, edging out Michael Campbell by a single shot. It was, in his own words, the most prestigious title of his career. He carried that form straight into the next tournament. 1 week later, at the Open Championship, Levet opened with a round of 66 to share the lead, then held a top 3 position heading into the final round. He eventually finished 5th, 5 shots behind the winner, a remarkable result on its own, but even more so coming directly after a victory. As Levet put it afterward, winning 1 week and contending for a major the next was unreal. Though he admitted the fatigue of it all was something he had learned to manage only through experience. That same year, Levet earned a wildcard selection for the European Ryder Cup team, heading to Oakland Hills in Michigan for his first and only appearance in the competition. In the singles matches, he was paired against Fred Funk of the United States. The two golfers traded shots all afternoon, and at one point, on the par 3 13th hole, both nearly made a hole-in-one within moments of each other, a rare coincidence that had the crowd buzzing. Levet held his nerve to the end, closing out Funk one up to secure a full point for Europe. That single win contributed to a historic result. Team Europe defeated the United States by a score of 18.5 to 9.5, the largest margin of victory in Ryder Cup history at the time. Levet closed out 2004, ranked 5th on the European Order of Merit, the best finish of his career. His consistency ran deeper than any single season, though. Across 13 career major championship appearances, Levet made the cut every single time. A quiet statistic that rarely makes headlines, but one that speaks to a level of reliability few golfers ever reach. Even now, more than 2 decades later, his 6 European Tour titles remain the most ever won by a French golfer. No countryman has matched that number since. The years that followed brought Thomas Levet back to the winner's circle again and again. In 2008, he claimed the Open de Andalusia, defeating a 19-year-old Oliver Fischer in a playoff. The following year, he added the Open de España to his collection, a victory he chose to dedicate to Seve, the golfer who, more than anyone, had defined Spanish golf for an entire generation. Then came July of 2011, and with it, the most emotional win of his career. At the Alstom Open de France, played on French soil, Levet held off the field to win by a single shot, his 6th European Tour title, and by far his most meaningful. It was a home victory, in front of a home crowd, in a country that had waited years to see one of its own lift a trophy on native ground. What happened next turned triumph into disaster within minutes. Celebrating beside the green, Levet leapt into the greenside lake, a spontaneous, joyful gesture from a man known for wearing his emotions openly. The water, however, was far shallower than it looked. Levet came up with a broken shin bone, the celebration instantly overshadowed by pain. The Open Championship was set to begin just days later, and Levet was forced to withdraw entirely, sidelined for 2 months while his leg healed. It was not the last time his own body would betray him at the worst possible moment. In January of 2012, competing at the Volvo Champions in South Africa, Levet slipped walking down a staircase near the 11th tee and broke his ribs. An X-ray in Abu Dhabi confirmed the damage, and once again, he was ruled out of major tournaments, this time missing 7 weeks of golf. Writing about it himself afterward, Levet described the fall in his own words as a flip, a flop, a splash, and a tumble into the bush, a wry shrug from a man who had, by then, grown used to his own body, finding new ways to interrupt his golf. By the late 2010s, Thomas Levet had shifted his focus towards senior golf, joining what is now known as the Legends Tour. By then, he had already become a member of the so-called 500 Club on the DP World Tour, with over 560 career starts, the most of any French golfer. His senior career began in earnest in 2019, and in September of 2021, he returned to Saint-Nom-le-Bretèche, near Paris, to win the Legends Open de France at 13 under par, a victory he dedicated to his late coach, the man who had guided him since boyhood. 1 week later, he backed it up with another win at the Scottish Senior Open, calling it unreal that nobody had beaten him in 2 weeks. Away from competition, Levet now works as a commentator for French television, covering the majors and the Ryder Cup.